We arrived too late. The silence told me everything. If you're listening to this, stay with me until the end. Some rescues end with noise, relief, and movement. This one began and ended in silence, and that silence followed me home. The call came in just after sunrise. Missing person, elderly male. Last seen the night before. Steep forest terrain, uneven ground, limited access. The kind of call that doesn't scream urgency on paper, but settles heavy in your chest if you've been doing this long enough. We arrived at the trailhead while the morning fog was still clinging to the trees. The air was cold, damp, and smelled like wet leaves and soil. No wind, no birds. Forests are never truly quiet, but this one felt different. Too still, like it was holding something. If you want to understand what real rescue work feels like, not the highlight reels, stay with me. We split into teams and began the search pattern, radios low. Voices minimal, every step deliberate. Loose rocks, slick roots, steep drops hidden by brush. One wrong move and we'd add another victim to the list. As we moved deeper, the terrain got worse. Narrow paths, sudden drop-offs, inclines that forced your calves to burn with every step. Sweat formed under my gear despite the cold. My breathing stayed controlled, but my body already knew this would be a long day. Searches like this are a mental grind. You're scanning for signs while fighting your own thoughts. You hope to find something. You're afraid of what that something might be. About 2 hours in, I noticed the first sign. A disturbed patch of leaves near a slope, not obvious. Most people would have missed it. But years of walking terrain like this teach you to read the ground like a story. I knelt, touched the soil. Still damp, recent. A slide mark. My stomach tightened. We followed the line downward, slow and careful. The slope dropped fast, covered in loose dirt and rocks that shifted under your boots. If he went down here, he wouldn't have stopped easily. That's when the forest went completely silent. No insects, no birds. Even the wind seemed to back away. The silence told me everything. I didn't say it out loud. You don't. You let the process finish before your mind jumps ahead. But my pace changed. So did my breathing. My hands tightened around my gloves. We found him at the bottom of the ravine. He was lying on his side, partially concealed by brush, as if the forest itself was trying to hide what it had taken. His clothes were torn, one shoe missing, skin pale, almost gray. I checked for signs of life out of habit, even when experience already knows the answer. No breath, no pulse, cold to the touch. We had arrived too late. There's a moment after you confirm it where time stretches. Sounds return slowly. Radios crackle again. Your own heartbeat becomes loud in your ears. I closed his eyes. Not because it changes anything, but because it's a human thing to do. We secured the area, documented the position, and waited for extraction. Procedures matter, even when the outcome doesn't change. As we waited, I looked around at the terrain, the slope, the rocks, the distance. He probably fell in the dark, alone, confused, injured, unable to climb back up. That's the part that stays with you. People think the hardest rescues are the dramatic ones. Fires, crashes, screaming chaos. They're wrong. The hardest ones are quiet, where nothing can be fixed anymore, only respected. Halfway through this story, I want you to understand something. Not every rescue ends in victory, but everyone teaches you something about time, preparation, and humility. If you want to hear the truth about this job, stay with me. We carried him out slowly, carefully, not because he could feel it, but because dignity doesn't disappear when life does. The climb back up was brutal. Every step burned. My shoulders ached under the weight. Sweat soaked through my gear despite the cold. No one complained. No one rushed. Silence again, but a different kind now. At the top, the sun had finally broken through the fog. Light filtered through the trees, unfairly beautiful for a morning like this. I stood there for a moment before heading back, looking at the forest. It hadn't changed. It never does. Nature doesn't apologize. And that's when the weight settled in. We hadn't failed, we'd done our job. But we hadn't won either. Those are the calls that define you, whether you want them to or not. We stayed with him longer than the protocol strictly required. Not because the rules allow it, but because sometimes the rules don't cover what feels right. The forest had already taken enough. We weren't going to rush the last part. Extraction in terrain like that is slow, technical, and unforgiving. Ropes were set carefully, anchors tested twice. Every movement was deliberate. One slip could turn a recovery into another emergency. That's the irony of these calls. Even when the danger seems over, it isn't. As we secured him to the stretcher, my hands moved automatically. Straps tightened, head immobilized. Everything done as if he were still alive. Respect doesn't end when the heartbeat does. The climb out burned in a way that settles deep into your muscles. Legs shaking, lower back screaming. Sweat running down my spine despite the cold air. No one spoke. Radio stayed silent unless absolutely necessary. Words felt out of place. Halfway up, I paused for a moment, bracing myself against a tree. I looked down the ravine one last time. From above, it didn't look that bad. That's how terrain lies to you. From the wrong angle, danger hides in plain sight. That's something experience teaches you. Perspective matters. In rescue, in life, in judgment. If you're still listening, this is where the job gets honest. There's no adrenaline now. No urgency pushing you forward. Just weight, effort, and time to think. And thinking can be heavier than any stretcher. I wondered how long he lay there before the cold settled in. Whether he called out. Whether anyone heard. Whether he realized at the end that help was already on the way, just not fast enough. Those questions don't have answers. But they still show up. When we reached the top, the trailhead felt strangely normal. Cars parked neatly, sunlight cutting through trees. Life untouched by what had just happened a few hundred feet away. That contrast never stops feeling wrong. Law enforcement took over. Paperwork began. Statements given, times recorded. Facts documented in clean lines and official language. None of it captured the weight of carrying a man out of a forest where he took his last breath. Later, we met with the family. That's the part no one ever wants, but everyone remembers. They stood together, holding onto each other like gravity had doubled. Faces pale. Eyes searching ours for something we couldn't give. I spoke slowly, clearly, no euphemisms. No false comfort. I told them where we found him. I told them we did everything possible. I told them he wasn't alone at the end. That last part matters, even when it doesn't change the outcome. The woman who I assume was his wife nodded as I spoke. She didn't cry at first. She just listened, absorbing every word like she was afraid missing a detail would make it worse later. When it finally hit her, it hit hard. Soundlessly at first, then all at once. You don't fix moments like that. You just stand there and carry your share of it. If stories like this matter to you, if you want the reality behind the uniform, stay with me. This job isn't about glory. It's about being present when things break. Afterward, back at the station, everything felt off. The usual noise, the jokes, the routine. I went through the motions, but part of me was still in that ravine, staring at disturbed leaves and cold rock. That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was light and restless. Forests showed up in my dreams. Silence. Slopes that never seemed to end. Years ago, calls like this used to shake me harder. I'd question every decision, every minute. Now the questions are quieter, but they last longer. Experience doesn't erase them. It just teaches you how to live with them without letting them take over. I woke up before dawn and sat outside, listening to the world wake up. Birds, wind, distant traffic. Normal sounds that felt like proof that life keeps moving, whether you're ready or not. That's one of the hardest lessons this job teaches. You don't get to pause the world for grief. You carry it while everything else keeps going. Later that day, we reviewed the operation. Timelines, decisions, terrain assessment. Nothing indicated a mistake. No delays, no missed steps. We'd done the job right. That should have been comforting. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. Because knowing you did everything correctly doesn't always quiet the part of you that wishes there had been one more minute to work with. I thought about the moment we arrived, the quiet. How my instincts knew before my eyes confirmed it. That sense never leaves you once you develop it. It's not pessimism. It's pattern recognition built over years of seeing how stories end. And still, you show up every time hoping this one will be different. We don't stop searching because sometimes we arrive too late. We keep searching because sometimes we don't. That balance is what keeps you in this job long enough to become a veteran. And the story wasn't finished yet. The extraction was complete, and the forest began to feel like a normal place again, though it would never be the same for me. Every tree, every slope, every shadow carried a memory now. I walked back slowly, letting my boots crunch over the fallen leaves, feeling the weight of the day settle into my shoulders. At the trailhead, the rest of the team waited quietly. Not a word was spoken about what had happened, but no words were necessary. We all knew. We had arrived too late, but we had done everything we could once we were there. I thought about the family, how they would be told, how they would react. There's a kind of honesty in this job that you carry beyond the scene. It doesn't leave when you clock out. It doesn't disappear with the uniform. You carry it home in small, persistent ways. Later, the family met us at a safer location, not the scene, to receive the formal report. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, brimming with questions that had no real answers. I told them, clearly and simply, what had happened. We arrived as quickly as possible. We followed every protocol. He had not survived the fall. No mistakes had been made. Only circumstances beyond our control. Silence followed my words. That silence is heavy. It presses down. It settles into your chest. And the only way to bear it is to stand firm, to acknowledge it, and to remember that you tried. I looked at the family's grief and thought about how fragile life is, how quickly it can vanish even when everything seems ordinary. That's the truth no one ever wants to admit until they have to. It's a hard truth, but it's real. Back at the station, the air smelled faintly of pine and gear, coffee and damp clothing. Routine work resumed around me, but I sat quietly for a while, letting the memories replay in my mind. Every decision, every step, every second mattered. Sometimes, despite all of that, it isn't enough. And that's the reality of this work. Years of experience teach you how to act quickly, how to assess terrain, how to lead a team efficiently. But experience doesn't give you a guarantee. It doesn't give you control over outcomes, only over your own actions. That's a lesson that remains with you long after the calls have ended. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to understand what that really means. The life you save isn't always the life you reach in time to protect. And yet, you must still act. You must still show up. You must still do everything in your power. That's the difference between a firefighter and someone who just watches. Days later, I revisited the forest mentally, replaying the movements, the slope, the signs we had missed. Could we have gone faster? Seen more? Anticipated the hidden drop? Experience whispers possibilities constantly, reminding you that even perfect execution can't change everything. The team gathered later for a debrief. We discussed timelines, terrain, communications. Procedures were followed. Lessons were noted. There was no blame, only reflection. Only an understanding that the next call might be similar but different, and that vigilance and preparation are your only real allies. I sat alone afterward, staring out at the station yard, thinking about the man we found. He would never know how close we had come, how carefully we had worked, how much we had hoped to find him alive. His absence leaves a quiet weight that lingers, a reminder that every second counts. That's why I continue to tell these stories, not for glory, not for attention, but because reality doesn't come neatly packaged. Reality is difficult, unpredictable, and sometimes tragic. And hearing about it, understanding it, keeps others aware of the stakes and the dedication it takes to face them. If you want to hear more stories like this, the ones that show the truth of rescue work, subscribe and follow along. These are lessons that can't always be taught in a classroom or a drill, but they are lessons that matter. As I write this, I remember the silence in the forest, the way the earth seemed to hold its breath, the way we had to move carefully, deliberately, with respect for both the fallen and ourselves. I remember the look of the family and the weight of the words I had to speak. And I remember the quiet resolve that drives us back out into the world, again and again, knowing that sometimes arrival comes too late, and sometimes it does not. We show up, we act, we respect life, and we carry the lessons forward. The forest remains, the slopes remain, silence remains. But so does the understanding that every call shapes the firefighter, every call teaches. Every call matters, even when the outcome cannot be changed. And that is the truth behind every mission. The quiet reality that defines what it truly means to serve.